You are listening to the Green Living Chat podcast, brought to you by Ecoamet Solutions in Ghana. I'm your host, David. Here, we discuss emerging environmental issues in and around the world. We use this platform to promote environmental-related projects. So stick around with us. Here we go. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of the Green Living Chat podcast. My guest today is Nicole Baker Loke, who is a former North Pacific groundfish fisheries observer, a research scientist at the University of Washington, and the founder of Net Your Problem. On this episode, Nicole tells us about her activities at her company, Net Your Problem, which collects fishery gadgets from fishermen and send them to recyclers who turn it into raw materials needed to manufacture plastic products. Net Your Problem has been actively establishing programs to dispose of waste in remote fishing communities since 2017 and currently operating in Alaska, Maine, and California, with development for other coastal ports along the coast of the US. We also talked about the role of effective recycling in circular economy and the loopholes we need to consider in sustainable economic development. Nicole's passion for education and her work is amazing, and no wonder among her numerous awards, features, and interviews, she is a finalist in the Rare Solution Search competition for solutions to plastic pollution that rely on behavior change. So why don't you take a minute and find a link to Rare Solution Search competition in the show notes and vote for Net Your Problem. Now I can't wait for you to get details of this conversation, so grab a coffee and let's get into this episode. Hi Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me on the Green Living Chats podcast. I'm really glad that you could make it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, David.
Yes, I think we've really had a very interesting conversation even before we started discussing this. And I remember very well that just a couple of months ago, that's when I got to know about your work. I've been following it, watching some of your things on YouTube. It's very encouraging. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of people in this industry. So today I'm super enthused to talk about some of the things that you're doing. It will be very interesting to start right from where your interest came from. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up? What are the things that brought this kind of interest in you?
Yeah, I think the first memory that I have for how I got into my career path is when I went to a SeaWorld show when I was in 5th grade. So they have like captive whales and dolphins, kind of like an aquarium. And that was when I decided to be a marine biologist, because after one of the shows, I went up to one of the trainers and I asked her, how did she get the job that she had? Because that's what I wanted to be for a long time, was a dolphin trainer. So she said, you have to go and get a degree with marine biology and also with psychology. So since 5th grade, that's what I was moving towards, even though I remember I took this personality test or something when I was in middle school, and it said that the ideal job for me was a truck driver or somebody working at a mortuary to prepare dead bodies at a funeral home. And I was just like, I can't believe this is the right job for me.
What did you tell them?
It was like this written test that we had to do, and we were sharing the answers amongst our friends afterwards. And I was just like, no, something is wrong with this test. This is not for me. So I remember when I was 13 years old, I got scuba diving certified. I originally am from upstate New York, very close to Canada. So I got certified in September when it was snowing outside, when I did my dives to finally get certified. So I didn't do too much diving in my hometown, really, because it was cold. But I started diving a lot more when I was in college, and I did a study abroad experience in Bermuda. We took some marine biology classes there and learned how to do scientific diving. And everything that I learned about the ocean, I just wanted to learn more. I loved college, taking all different kinds of classes about coral reefs and marine mammals and even small algae. So the sustainability thing kind of came from my interest in the ocean and my academic experience, I guess.
All right. So that seems like a very interesting story. Right from the beginning, these kind of interests came in. I saw on the website, let me read it out to you. It says that her interest in this topic was inspired by a pally of ocean collaboration with Adidas. Can you tell us a little bit about this story?
Yeah, so that story is what started my interest to start Net Your Problem, which is the business that we're going to talk about a little later. But I have a master's degree in marine biology. And while I was getting that degree, I was working as a fisheries observer in Alaska. So these are scientists that go out on commercial fishing vessels. They live with the fishermen on the boats. Every time they go out fishing, they come along and collect data about what the fishermen are catching, the species of fish, how old the fish are, how long they are. All this information gets reported to the US federal government. So that job I was doing, and I remember this so vividly, I was sitting outside of the library in Unalaska, which is also sometimes known as Dutch Harbor. It's where the show The Deadliest Catch is filmed, if anybody has ever seen that. But I was sitting outside the library there, using their internet after hours to check my email and send messages to my family and stuff. And I came across this article talking about this collaboration between Parley and Adidas, and they had developed this prototype sneaker out of recycled fishing gear. So they collected the fishing gear from a fishery, I think it was in the Antarctic Ocean, and they used the plastic from that net to design a sneaker. And for me, it was this light bulb moment where I had already been working on fishing boats for 5 years and never really put two and two together that these nets were made out of plastic. Some things you look at, it's plastic, like a water bottle or a milk jug, that it's made out of plastic, but plastic comes in so many different forms and so many different chemical formulations. And so I just hadn't put the two together. So yeah, once I knew that fishing nets were made from plastic, then it was go time. It was try to figure out how we could recycle these.
Yes, I also got this too, because I never thought of this. We all knew that one of the issues that are happening in the ocean is we find a lot of plastic bottles. We have microplastics in there. So recently I've been watching some documentaries probably towards this interview, and I realized that the industry has a lot of issues and a lot of impact on the environment. Since this is something that you've been doing for a while, can you tell us a little bit about the environmental challenges that the fishing industry faces and some of its impact, and connect it to some of the traditional gears that the industry uses that is related to probably plastics?
Yeah, so I think probably my understanding of the environmental impacts of fishing come mostly from my academic job. So in addition to working at and starting Net Your Problem, I am also a research scientist at the University of Washington in Seattle. We have a School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences where all different professors, students, staff do research about fisheries around the world. And so for the listeners, I was also explaining this to David early. So a fishery is a type of gear, a species of fish, and a geographic area. So when I use that word, I mean something like I trawl for pollock in Alaska. That's the unit that I'm talking about. Or when I say fisheries, that basically just means these different units all around either the US or all around the globe. And when we say the fishing industry, we mean all of the vessels that fish commercially, which means they catch fish to sell it so that people can then eat it. So when I think about the challenges for different fisheries, one of them is climate change. So climate change and the warming of the ocean causes fish to move to different locations. So the water is either too hot for them or too cold for them. So they either move north or they move south. And this can be a problem for countries whose fisheries or fish stocks or individual fish are basically leaving the geographic boundaries of a certain country. So you could think of this in Maine and Canada. So Maine is part of the US, Canada is a different country. Lobsters are moving from Maine north into Canada because the water is getting too warm. So that is definitely a challenge for the fishing industry in Maine when their target fish that they're trying to catch is going out of their geographic boundaries. I think another issue that the global commercial fishing industry is having is overfishing. So this is in the news all the time. I feel like it's saying there are no fish left in the ocean, like 90% of fisheries are unsustainable, which is not really true. There are some fisheries that are very well managed. The fishermen follow the rules. There's only a certain number of fish that they can catch, but that is not what is happening globally. So there are other countries where the systems in place or the rules and regulations that govern what fishermen can and cannot do are not as strict as they are in other countries. So in those places, more fish are being caught than is biologically sustainable.
You made mention that there are some companies in the industry who are already doing this sustainably, but we know that there are a lot of people in this industry who are doing this the other way, and it's impacting the environment and the ocean life negatively. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the waste that is coming out from this industry and how it's impacting the ocean life?
Yeah, the waste that I focus on the most is obviously the fishing gear. So there are a couple of different general categories of fishing gear. One is trawling, which is where you drag a net behind a boat, basically, and you collect the fish that are coming behind that. You can either do that benthic trawling, which is where that net sort of rolls along the bottom, or you can do that pelagic trawling, which is where it goes through the water column without having any contact with the bottom. You can also have seining or purse seining, which is where you have one large vessel and then another small vessel. And the small vessel takes the edge of the net and it basically goes around a school of fish and sort of encircles the school. And then they pull this line at the bottom, which basically makes a bag. And then all the fish are caught in that bag and they bring it on. You also have gill netting, which is where a net hangs vertically in the water. It has a bunch of floats at the top that keep that above the surface. And then it has a heavier line at the bottom that keeps the net oriented vertically. And then the fish swim into it and they get stuck. And then you also have long lining, which is where you have one really long line, and then you have these hooks that sort of float up into the water column that have bait on them, and fish come and bite that bait. So we have all these different types of gear, and the gear get replaced at different intervals. So if you catch your net on something, then maybe you have to replace it sooner because you ripped a big hole in it and you have to cut that part out and replace it. You can't be fishing a net with a big hole in it. So that's the type of waste that I deal with, is what is discarded or taken to the garbage basically when the fishermen are done using it. And we encounter all of these different types of gear that I mentioned.
Are you aware of how these kind of waste normally impacts the environment? Do they normally leave them in the ocean, or do they? So what is the problem here?
Yeah, I think most of the impacts that I've seen have been on the terrestrial environment. So there are obviously nets in the ocean that's referred to as ghost gear because it, keeps fishing after its intended life. There is another category of gear, if you want to call it, which is called end of life, which is just, I'm a fisherman, I'm done using this, and I want a discard of it. And that is what we focus on dealing with in implementing waste management systems for that end of life gear. So the impacts are primarily on the terrestrial environment, where the alternatives for those types of gear, if they don't get recycled, are they would go to the landfill, they would get burned, or they would be just indefinitely stored in some yard somewhere because we don't have a better idea of what to do with it. So those are the impacts that I normally see. And, at the landfill or in storage, that's basically wasting space and wasting resources, especially in small communities that are running out of landfill space. That is a real issue for them. Offering recycling is better because it frees up that space for other things. Burning nets or burning plastic in general is terrible for air pollution and all this stuff that is released into the air. So that's also not an ideal solution. But those are the main negative impacts, I guess you would say, for disposing of stuff on land.
Okay, so now let's go back and talk about net your problem. Really, why net your problem? I was thinking about it. Like, why that name?
Well, my sister came up with the name. I can't take credit for that, but I think it's a play on the words of not your problem. And the idea was that we would make fishing gear disposal so easy and so cost competitive that all fishermen have to do is say, this is the net that I want to get rid of, and then it's not their problem anymore. So that was sort of the impetus behind the
It's
idea of the
creative,
name.
really. I was thinking about it. Net your problem. But it's catchy. You can't forget it too.
That's good. That's good to have nobody be able to forget your business name.
Yeah, right. So can you tell us a little bit about your company? What are some of the operations you're doing, the capacity, and tell us a little bit about how you operate. Who do you work with? Who do you get in touch with? Let's get to know more about you.
Yeah, I will read our mission statement because I think it explains a lot of this very well. Our mission is to engage a variety of partners and stakeholders to develop an economically viable path to recycle end-of-life fishing gear, to contribute to the circular economy. See, I say contribute to circular economy, and then to decrease energy use and greenhouse gas emissions related to virgin plastic production. And the way that we do this is by collecting end-of-life fishing gear from fishermen and sending it to recycling companies. So we don't actually do the recycling ourselves, but we then try to increase demand for that plastic that is produced from the recycling companies and promote the products that are made from it. Because if there is no demand for that raw plastic from manufacturers, it doesn't make sense for me to collect it if nobody's going to use it. So that's not our core business activity, but it is important to making sure that what we're doing is valuable. And our main customers are fishermen that are done using our gear and would like an alternative to the ways that I mentioned previously that stuff gets disposed of: landfill, storage, or incineration. So that's what we're up to. And then I am in charge of the operations in Alaska and in Washington. That's where I live, in the state of Washington. And then we have another employee that's based in Southern California and another one in Maine. So each of these states have very large fishing industries and they generate a lot of waste. And so this summer, we're going to be hopefully collecting gear from 2 new locations in Alaska, 1 in New England, 1 in the southern US, and 2 in Washington. So yeah, we do 2 different kinds of projects, really. One is by starting new collection programs ourselves, where gear was never recycled previously, but we are not the first persons to think about this. So there are groups in the US that have been collecting gear previously, some for 10 years or more. And so a lot has changed in the recycling industry in the last couple of years. There are a lot of new regulations and policies. And so previous markets that existed for fishing gear to be recycled don't exist anymore. So we're helping those companies to find new places to send their gear to.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if this is a very common activity in the US or probably all around the world, but I think you just mentioned that. But since you just mentioned some things about challenges, I think we should go ahead and talk about some of the challenges that you have in your operation. Personally, I'm new to this idea of recycling fishing nets. So I think that there are not a lot of these industries or probably institutions around the world. But it should be a very difficult thing to do or probably to bring to the farmers, especially those who are not maybe educated or don't know about this and used to the norm. So what are some of these challenges that you have in your daily activities?
We are, from my understanding, the only ones in the US doing this. There are other people globally that are doing this on a wider geographic scale. And I think some of those organizations have more incentives that work in their favor. So, for example, in the European Union, fishing gear is actually going to be covered in an extended producer responsibility scheme in a couple of years. So that means that the people that produce nets, and I don't exactly know how they're defining producers, but need to be responsible for the product at the end of life. We don't have that in the US. So one of our major challenges is financing. In places where the landfill is free, how do you convince fishermen to pay for recycling? That can be something that is very challenging. And we have to get them to change their behavior. We have to get them to take it somewhere new, maybe separate out these twines that I mentioned previously that are not the same type of plastics. They might have to pay a little bit more for their disposal. So that is a big challenge for us, is how you were saying, educating about why this is important, why they should be doing extra work, basically, in a variety of different ways. And so I think that that's the space where it's possible for governments, for example, to get involved, to basically straighten out the incentives so that it makes it easier and cheaper to do the right thing than the wrong thing.
I think this generally cuts across, because if I talk to people who are into recycling, most of them talk about this main issue of educating people to understand the reason why they should go in for a more expensive method of disposing their or getting rid of their materials than just the usual thing of just dumping it for free. So I think that's a big challenge. So definitely there is a role for individuals, industries, and the government as well. You already mentioned about some of the things the government can do to help. So let's just talk a little bit about how can individuals and industries, of course, industries who are also making these materials, what can the government also do? What can NGOs do? What can institutions do to help solve this part of this challenge?
Yeah, I think the main one that comes to my mind first is to demand products that are made from recycled plastic. So I think a lot of times people sometimes feel like, I'm just one person, what can I do? I'm not a celebrity, I don't have this huge following, but people will not make things that we will not buy. That doesn't make any sense. So if you're in a store and you see two things next to each other, one is made with recycled plastic, one is not. If you can, purchase the one that is made from the recycled plastic. You're saying something with your money that you want this product, you value this, and then that shows that there is a demand for this material, which I talked about this before. If there's a demand, then that incentivizes the collection to supply that. So I think something that everybody can do is, by thinking a lot about what we purchase and where it comes from and what it's made out of. I would say that's a similar idea about eating fish. You should know where your fish comes from. You should know where your grains and your meat come from and make educated, informed choices. And I think that can take a lot of work, but once you sort of have brands or products that you feel comfortable with purchasing, it makes going to the grocery store a lot easier, right? I know in my mind now, I buy this brand of tuna. I already did all the research at one time, so now I'm going to keep going back and just buying the same brand. I don't have to think about it every time I go to the grocery store. So once you have done the initial research, it's a little bit easier in subsequent times when you're doing your purchasing. For industries, that's the same thing. It's responding to those consumer signals that you see, or environmental signals that you see, or public pressure that is obvious to me. I don't know if that is necessarily obvious to them, but it's not about, to me, making profit at all other costs, right? I think it is possible to make money while doing good things for the environment, doing good things for society. So maybe you're making a little less profit, but that should not be the driving force, in my opinion, for industries. You need to be considering the environment and the impacts on society as well. So integrating those into your values and making decisions.
So, do you think that recycling is really a sustainable solution to the fishing industry? And you also mentioned earlier that recycling is actually to help in the circular economy. How long can we go recycling fishing gears?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you define the word sustainable. So for us, we say that we are working on developing financially sustainable gear recycling programs. So that means that it doesn't rely on volunteers or unpaid labor or grants. It means that everybody that is involved in the disposal of the fishing gear is getting paid for their time and services. So that for us is really important to what we're doing. We don't want to spend all this time and work developing a solution that next year we just have to redo because we are now out of our grant and we have to figure out something else. So that's what we're working really hard to do, is not take like the easy road, which, I mean, getting grants is not even that easy, and just like doing a one-time project and doing a lot of PR and celebrating the successes. It's about spending the time and work and relationship building and research to figure out how we can do this sustainably long term. And I think if we do that, then this is a pretty good solution for how to get rid of fishing gear at the end of its life. I think, sometimes in my plastics recycling work, I come across people that just say, we need to ban all plastic, that's the only solution. I find that to be incredibly unrealistic. And when you think about the implications of that, what then are the alternatives? So if you're not going to use plastic fishing gear, for example, what are you going to make nets out of? Okay, maybe you're going to go back to making it out of some natural materials that really soak up water. So your net is going to be much heavier. And when you drag it through the water, that's going to cause the boat to burn more fuel because the net is heavier. So what is our overall environmental impact then when this smokestack is just chugging out smoke because they're burning so much fuel? So, in my opinion, you have to think about what the alternatives are to what you're proposing. And I think if we can figure out a way to do this in a financially sustainable way and make a business case and make sure that we're recycling in socially acceptable ways and environmentally acceptable ways, then I think we can go pretty far with recycling end-of-life gear.
Hi there, just a quick one. A bonus episode of my conversation with Nicole, where Nicole tells us about the role of recycling in circular economy and what recycling actually is readily available on all podcast platforms on the Green Living Chat podcast. On this bonus episode, you hear Nicole telling us about the fact that
well, I can tell you what I think recycling is not synonymous with, which I see this a lot. Recycling does not equal the circular economy. So recycling can contribute to the circular economy. It is not the circular economy. So recycling keeps non-renewable resources in circulation longer than one time.
So I recommend you check this episode out after listening to this episode. Now let's get back into today's conversation. All right, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would like to know a little bit about your research. I want to know a little bit about what you're doing in the university
My research focuses on supporting a lab that researches the global status of fish stocks. So the way that our university group is structured is it's supervised by a professor at the university, and then he supervises students that are going for their master's or PhD. We also have research staff, which are employed by him through grants that he gets to do research projects. And then we also have postdocs, which are people that recently graduated with their PhDs and are on contract for a certain number of years to do a certain research project. So all of the research activities that all of these different members do focus on fisheries management, which I mentioned earlier is basically the set of rules and regulations that govern when fishermen can fish, what types of gear can they use, what species, what length of all these different things. And then we also research the status of fish stocks. So what is their biomass or abundance? How many of them are there? And what is the fishing pressure or the amount of fishing activity that is placed upon them, and try to figure out what factors influence the positive statuses, basically, which is high abundance and relatively reasonable fishing pressure. So we do research projects on salmon in Alaska, on tunas, on stocks in the US, and stocks in Australia and New Zealand and Europe and everywhere else. And we try to estimate the status as best we can for those stocks that are not subject to a formal stock assessment process, which that term just means a lot of data comes in and scientists are running mathematical models to estimate the status of that. So that doesn't happen in all countries, but there are other things that we can use to try to get an idea of the status of stocks there.
I think it's a very interesting area to study. There is a lot of reports going on about the agricultural industry, right? People are talking about how cattle is reared and the impact it's having on the environment. Recently, there is also a movie on a documentary by Netflix on how the fishing industry is probably depleting the ocean life or the impact it's having. So I think you are the right person to talk to and give your opinion on this. From your research and the chunk of data that you have been getting from your research, what is your general opinion about the movie, and how can the fishing industry be more sustainable or probably have less environmental impact?
I think that when you described it as a movie first instead of a documentary, that is a more accurate representation, because I think when you call something a documentary, there is a certain expectation that people have about the content of that animated feature, let's just say. If you watch something on the Discovery Channel, you have the expectation that what you're watching, it's well researched, well supported by scientific evidence. And that is where I think that this movie really falls short, because it has a clear motivating factor, which is revealed at the end, that they don't want you to eat fish. They want you to be vegans and only eat plants. So when you're talking about a documentary, that is not how a documentary would end, with this sort of advocacy message. I think the other main criticism that I have of that movie is that it paints the whole global commercial fishing industry with one brush. Does not say that in some places these are issues, in some places that they are not. They just say all commercial fishing, it's with all of these issues. And that is really offensive to a lot of fishermen that I know, especially in the US, that have worked so hard to try to remedy some of these issues that maybe were present in the past, that follow all of the rules and regulations that the US has for their fishermen, that manages their fisheries so well that They are rated like #1 in the world. This is all like debatable, I guess, who is #1, who gets the gold trophy. But I think my opinion of this and what I would say to people that have watched this and what I have said to some of my friends is that you should not be afraid to eat fish. You should know where your fish comes from. Just like you should know where your beef comes from, where your grains come from. You should be an informed consumer about where the clothes that you're wearing come from, all the things that you buy. And I don't think fish is any different. It might be more difficult because there is a lot of different species of fish that are caught by a lot of different gear types in a lot of different places in the world, but that shouldn't stop you from eating fish, which is a very healthy, low-fat, high-protein, nutritious source of food that nutritionists would say that you should eat twice a week. So I think there are a lot of benefits of that. And some of the issues that they raised in that movie are issues in fisheries somewhere in the world. But to just say that nobody should eat fish, I just think is so much propaganda really than presenting facts. And with the fishing net part specifically, they talk about how 46% of the plastic in the ocean is fishing nets. That's what a lot of my friends regurgitated that back to me when they were asking me. And I don't want to say intentionally misleading, but that statistic is about the percentage of plastic that is found in the Pacific garbage patch that was fishing gear. It is not 46% of all of the plastic in the ocean is fishing gear. So I don't know, I don't remember exactly what the wording is, but a few people said that to me and sort of got it twisted up. So that's, of the plastic that is from sea-based sources, and the stuff that makes it to the garbage patch, and the stuff that floats. Remember, I mentioned before that not everything floats. 46% of it is fishing gear. But I think they're on this train where they want you to hate fishing and the fishing industry. So they present that in a way that makes you feel like it's much more of an issue than it actually is.
For sure, I also do think that there is a problem of which we don't have to ignore, and we have to educate people about it to get to know what is happening. Because I think at the end, we have to conclude that these are the options that we have. These are the things that we can do as a remediation or probably as a recovery method, but not to conclude in a certain way negatively that we should do this and do that. I think this has raised a lot of conversation all around. I actually sent this to a friend and he sent me a picture of the last can of tuna he's gonna eat and he's not gonna buy tuna anymore in his life. So it's crazy, this kind of conversations that are going on. So I think it's best we do educate people to get to know. Of course, there is a problem, and there has to be some solutions to this.
You make sure he listens to this podcast, because this friend, you go out and buy some more tuna and eat it and you feel okay. I'm telling you.
Yeah. All right. So now let's get to know a little bit about how people can collaborate with you, because you made mention that you have some new projects and some new cities that you'll be collecting waste from. So let us know how people can collaborate with you. How can people invest? And what are some of the future operations that you are thinking of doing?
We are very welcoming in who we consider a stakeholder or a partner in what we do. I did a webinar on this called Engaging Unlikely Partners. And the reason that I called it that is because we have businesses like a construction company, a brewery, fishermen's apparel company that are supporting us in different ways. And you don't have to be an NGO or a fisherman or somebody that is traditionally involved in this plastic pollution movement, if you want to call it that, in order to be part of the solution. So everybody can contribute in different ways. We need places to store gear. We need communications. We need transportation, we need heavy equipment to move nets around. So those roles can be filled by a variety of different organizations. In fact, we had a brewery offer to let us store nets in their parking lot. So that's perfect. You know, you wouldn't think you're making beer, we're recycling fishing nets, we're the perfect team, but that was a possibility for us to work with that organization. So I think that's how you could be involved, I guess, in the operations of what we're doing. If you are a fisherman that does not have a way to recycle your gear right now, please reach out to us. My email and phone number, I think David will put with the show notes or something. So reach out to us and we would be happy to build a collection program where it doesn't exist. That really is our specialty. I think I mentioned raising awareness, and also we are not a nonprofit. We are set up as a for-profit business, but we do have, so I want to just be transparent there. Your contributions would not be tax deductible, but we have a place on our website for people to give money if they are also interested in that. It takes a lot of staff time to build projects from scratch until we get to the point where we are collecting gear, which is the primary way that we make money. So that really helps.
I think what you do is very important. We haven't seen a lot of these companies coming out. You're young and you're passionate, and I love this, what you do. So I just want to say that congratulations for how far you've been able to go with your company. And I really wish you the best in all the processes. And I hope that more people will be interested in getting into your work. And the little that we can all do to add our voice to advocacy and encouraging people to recycle at least some of the things that they do. And we can also try and educate the fishermen and the people in this industry to do better at sustainability. With that being said, if you have the chance to change just one thing about our attitude towards the environment and how we keep consuming and wasting, just one thing, what would that be?
I think it would be the perception that you can't do good things for the environment while still making money. I think that people think that this is a trade-off, that you can do one or the other. And I think we should find ways to do both at the same time. There's a lot of this triple bottom line, you know, people, planet, and profit kinds of things. And I think we just need to do more of that they're not mutually exclusive. And I think there's this phrase called like the social license to operate. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like, does the public or society give you permission, business X, to operate based on like how you do business? So like when companies spill oil, like that takes away from their social license to operate. So I think companies' social license to operate is going to continue to decrease if they don't figure out ways of intertwining all of these things and realizing that you can make money and have businesses without destroying society and the planet.
You really have a lot to say. I think I should just give you another platform to just let's talk about these things about society. I think we should do something like that, maybe another time.
Part 2 of the Net Your Problem podcast coming soon.
Yes. But really, thank you so much for making time today for this episode. And I'm really grateful. I really enjoyed the conversation we had. And I hope that we can share more of these opinions next time. And I wish you the best in your operations. I don't know if you have any last words or something that I missed.
My last words are, maybe don't feel like it's all or nothing. You can eat fish responsibly. You can use plastic responsibly. So just think about what you're doing, what you're consuming. And I think that will go a long way. You don't have to be like a zero waste Instagram influencer overnight, but just make small changes. Think about what you're doing, educate your inner circle about issues that you have actually researched. Don't, just read headlines and share stuff that you're not really knowledgeable about. And that can go a long way towards improving our living conditions.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So Nicole's details are going to be in the show notes. So if you want to reach her or collaborate with her within her region or even outside the US, I think she should be willing to do such collaborations as well. So thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on the podcast, and I wish you the best.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Green Living Chat. Our goal here is to discuss emerging environmental issues and challenges and find possible solutions to educate the public. So why don't you get in touch with us on all our social media platforms at EcoAmet Solutions, or visit our website www.ecoametsolutions.com, and we'll be excited to hear from you and engage with you. Consider giving us a star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. See you on the next episode. Until then, live green.